appreciates that crime is complex, that crime is multidimensional, and that crime has multiple causes. Now, this means that if one wants to understand crime, if you want to understand the problem of crime fully, one has to look at the various factors. This would be biological, economic factors, and all that. Now, the question arises, where are we? Where are we in this country in terms of analyzing crime in that way? Now, we found ourselves in a situation where we do not have data that covers all these dimensions. In particular, comprehensive studies that would enable us to predict crime, or at least to have an understanding of patterns of crime in the multidimensional fashion that I have indicated. Now, the question arises, are we able in this country to talk to the problem in that fashion? My argument is simply that we are, but perhaps not in the way that we would want to, because the sources of data that we have are diverse, and the methodologies that have been used to gather the data are equally diverse. But one can get data from annual police reports. The police have done studies such as the burglary study, and we have various reports by international organizations and other entities. We also have reports like the Gaborone report on youth and deviance in the country. Now, if we do not have data that talks to, if these different sources of data do not talk to one another, then how can we help the public and policymakers to formulate policy and understand the problem better? Now, I want to say that I'm going to, because we do not have such studies, I am going to cheat. I am going to cheat by focusing on what I've called risk factors. Why do I want to focus on risk factors? I want to focus on risk factors for a number of reasons. Based on the fact that these risk factors in particular are useful in understanding youth crime and offending. Now, if we consider, not to say that all crime is committed by young people, if we consider the fact that the majority of crime is committed by people between the ages of 15 and 35, who are the youth, right? That is, by the way, universal. You look at statistics from any country, that is what you are likely to see. Now, the second reason is that more than 60% of the population consists of young people. It is therefore important to address the issue from that perspective. Now, the issue becomes, if we are talking about risk factors, what exactly are we talking about? We are talking about the factors which would, if they are present, would be likely to lead to offending by young people. And these factors can be broken down into individual, family, peer, school. Now, to perhaps make it more concrete for us here, if, for example, you are looking at schools, schools are both a risk factor and a protective factor. They can be a risk factor and a protective factor. Now, if you look at school, you would, if you look at school, how school influences behavior, you will see that young people who perform well are less likely to get involved in criminal behavior, and young people who can see that they have better prospects in the future are less likely to get involved in criminal activity. Now, if you look at the performance, the performance of our schools, the Form 5 results, for example, indicate that out of 37,000, who set the final exams, only about 3,500 passed and would be eligible for admission in tertiary institutions. What does that say about the rest, who are in fact the majority? So, similarly, if you look at the family, you are talking about stability, you are talking about issues like divorce, you are talking about violence in the family, you are talking about other issues related to the family. Now, if you look at things like divorce rate, which is around 52% at the moment, that tells you there is a lot of instability in our families. If you look at marriage is declining, but studies the world over do indicate that children who are I'm not here should not be understood to be suggesting that in always and everywhere children who are brought up by single parents would end up as criminals. But the majority, the statistics do indicate that they are more likely than children who come from a stable environment to end up committing offenses, right? And if we look at peer pressure, we go to our villages, we find that there are lots of youth gangs, and belonging to a youth gang is a factor which is likely to cause a young person to start offending. And then you have individual factors which have to do with things like the psychology of the individual and other psychosocial factors. Now, if you will excuse me. Now, this might seem somewhat perhaps abstract, but if you look at the Children's Act, these factors are recognized as important in determining the destiny of children. for example, the Children's Act says if a child comes into conflict with the law, the police would be required to cause a social worker to investigate, to do an investigation into the background of the child, and then produce a report regarding the background of the child. And what do these reports look into? They typically look into the general family environment, which we have already talked about. They look into the performance of the child at school, which is an important factor. And they also look at the health, which goes to issues like, individual factors and psychosocial issues. Now, what am I saying? I'm saying we need, as a solution, our programs need to speak to all this, right? I appreciate that it is not a matter for the police to be looking at some of these factors, even though it affects their work. This is stuff that government in general is supposed to do. For example, when you are talking about family, making sure that the levels of poverty are reduced, structural factors and things like that. Now, but what I'm suggesting in terms of policy and things that are practical and is something that the police themselves can recommend would be comprehensive studies, comprehensive multi-factor studies that we don't have. That would help us understand what is happening to young people, what is happening to different social groups, and to what extent, for example, poverty is a factor in explaining crime. Because usually you find that one factor on its own cannot explain crime, but it is usually when these factors come together. And what we don't know is how and to what extent they come together in our context. And we need such studies. I think that is where I want to stop. And if there are any issues regarding statistics, I can speak to those, particularly with respect to some of the points I've raised regarding risk factors. For me, at the end of the day, if you do not attend to 60% of the population, which in any case universally is responsible for majority of crimes, then you have a problem. If I may give an example, if you take the top 10 crimes, top 10 most common crimes in Botswana, you will find that a great number of them are committed by people who belong to the group bracket that I've just mentioned. For example, if you take rape, for example, you will find that the great majority of those who rape are under the age of 28. I think that is where I want to stop for now.
Are neleng Dr. Malila Lehofi. Ra leboga mongame ene le Dr. Malila yalo jaaka na re ha tshedimosetso ya dingwe tsa dilo tse di ka tswang di baka crime ra tswelela ka thulaganyo ya rona mo nakong ya ka re kopile le ta tshwara dikakgelelo tsa lona le dipotso le be le ta le di tsenya morago ga the presentation ya bohelo e tabong e latela e tsenang gompieno mo nakong ye let's join our hands together as we invite up front President of the Botswana Psychiatric Association, Dr. Mpho Thula, who is a psychiatrist in his private clinic, Ebiduan Zeta Clinic. Ngaka o nang le over 16 years of experience as a psychiatrist. Akile adirela mo ga goromente ibile he's the former head of Sbrana Psychiatric Hospital, Dr. Thula se. Ene utile gore o ka goroga mongae. Ene utile gore ha tshedimosetso ya gore botsogo ba tlhaloganyo bo amana jang le go dirwa ga melato, mental health in relation to crime. Tsa ke re ka selle ka Setswana batsadi ba se.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All protocol observed. I'm Dr. Thula, as has already been said, and I'm a psychiatrist. So I've been asked to speak about mental health and crime. And in my presentation, there will be an introduction. I'll look at violence and crime amongst those with mental illness. I'll try and look at the targets of that kind of violence, the risk factors, how mental illness interacts with the criminal justice system, and suggest some interventions, strategies. And if there's time, I'll also touch on murder-suicides because it's a very topical topic in this country. And then I'll summarize. To start with, I would like to indicate that the relationship between crime and mental health is not a simple one. It's quite complex. Unfortunately, the public tends to believe that people with mental illness are all very dangerous, and we've been socialized to be afraid of those with mental illness. And this false belief has resulted in marginalization and stigma against those with mental illness, which is really unjustified. Because when you think about it, a lot of you here probably have residences which are old, got to stop nonsense, and the electric fence, the Njamudjara thing. But I doubt if you are doing all of that because you are afraid you are afraid of fellow citizens, me and you, because really the vast majority of crime is committed by those without mental illness. And I'm going to show the statistics in a minute. The major determinants of crime, and I think the criminologists touched on that, are mostly the social, demographic, and socio-economic factors. Other factors are things such as substance abuse. Mental illness contributes only about 4 to 5% of criminality and violence in the society. And these statistics have been shown in multiple countries, including in Africa, in the West, in the Americas. that the attributable risk when it comes to violence and crime is very low when you look at mental illness. It increases to maybe double that statistics to 10% when you look at those with both mental illness and substance abuse problems. But all in all, people with mental illness are more likely to be victims of crime than they are to be perpetrators of crime. So it's more common for motho a nang tlhaloganyo e nne ene a direlwa molato go na le gore ene a dire molato. So this notion that people with mental illness are violent and they are responsible for the scourge of crime in society and we should be afraid of them is really wrong. If we want to blame somebody about crime, we have to look elsewhere. But having said that, we do accept that there is an increase in the relative risk of being violent if you have serious mental illness. We are talking here about schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder. There is an increased risk of violence compared to those who do not have the condition. But like I said, the attributable risk when you look at the societal violence and crime is relatively small at about 5 to 10%. And when you look at who they target when they are involved in criminal behaviors, it's usually family members who are the targets and those who are in relationships with them. It's very rare for people with mental illness, when they do commit crimes, to target strangers. So this idea of someone with mental illness randomly going around, being a menace to everybody and committing crimes, is really not accurate. Where the people with mental illness are arrested for crimes, the vast majority is for minor crimes. And I'll come and talk about it again in a minute because it relates to why there is an overrepresentation of people with mental illness in prisons compared to the general population. And the risk factors for crime I've spoken about. Some of the risk factors for crime amongst those with mental illness are the same as the risk factors for crime amongst all of us. You look at the demographic and socioeconomic factors, the typical criminal is a young male individual. You look at other issues such as the background of violence, parental issues, how somebody was raised up. You look at unemployment, you look at crimes of passion where there have been breakup of relationship. But substance abuse is actually a major risk factor, even when it comes to those with mental illness, because it tends to double or triple the risk that they can be violent or be involved in crime when they both have a mental illness like depression or schizophrenia, and they're also abusing substances. And because of the stigma that is prevalent amongst those with mental illness and the victimization, because people with mental illness, like I said, they are more likely to be victims of crime. And people harass them and they use nasty words towards them, and even in families, sometimes they're abused. So they tend to act out and revenge sometimes because of what people say to them, or because of how they are treated in families, in society. And victimization of people with mental illness increases the risk that they can be involved in crimes. Sometimes it's a way of trying to revenge or to fight back, because people are not using the right words against them and they are basically abusing them. And like I've said, the risk is more common in families where there's some interdependence and there's some mutual interdependence in terms of finances and other issues between the individual and the victim. Now, the strange thing is that when you get into the prison population, those with mental illness are grossly overrepresented, and studies have shown that up to 50, 60% even of the prison population have a mental illness. Now, why is that? Because when you look at the prevalence of mental illness in the prison population, it's multiple times the prevalence in the general population outside the prison. Various reasons are responsible for that. One of them is that those with mental illness are more likely to be arrested and successfully prosecuted. Partly because violence and crime by those with mental illness is often widely publicized by the media and sensationalized, which then means that the resources are really put into that to try and get the situation. The person is arrested. A lot of the times, because they are vulnerable mentally, they are easy to confess, they are easy to prosecute, and they are easy to get a conviction from, whereas other people are more complicated to do that. The other issue is that the scarcity of community mental health resources tend to divert those people who should otherwise be on treatment to the prison settings, especially in countries like Botswana, where there is no policies which are really enshrined in law for diverting people with mental illness from the criminal justice system to the treatment services. So this has been called the criminalization theory, that mental illness ends up being criminalized instead of having those people going towards treatment. Penrose actually said that in 1939, when there was a wave of deinstitutionalization in the West and in the Americas, where, as you would know, that historically, people with mental illness were kept in large asylums, and there were a huge population of people with mental illness in asylums until the times when the human rights movement became strong, and there was a lot of deinstitutionalization where we shifted from institution to treating people in the community. And Penrose then hypothesized then that the reduction in the number of beds in psychiatric institutions tends to be proportional to the increase in the prison population. And that is actually still true today, because we know that where there is scarcity of community mental health services, the people with mental illness tend to go into the prison settings. And then you have this notion of the prison as a mental health institution, which has been written about in a lot of papers. So, what interventions then can we put into place to try and prevent those with mental illness to drift into criminality? Well, the obvious one is the one I've been talking about, that there need to be provision of adequate, accessible, and comprehensive mental health services. Those families who have a family member who has mental illness know too well the struggles that you go through when you are living with somebody with mental illness in terms of the scarcity of services and follow-up that there is in our country. And this is something that needs to be looked at. And it's not only mental health services, it's issues such as housing, it's issues such as employment, which actually means that those people are properly integrated into the community. They feel as part of the community, they are accepted and they are not marginalized. Given the situation that we already have, where there's a very high percentage of people with mental illness in the prisons, we do need to have a proper provision of mental illness within the prison settings to avoid those people going back, the revolving door scenario where the person goes out into the community, drifts again around, and there's no treatment, there's no follow-up, and they end up being picked up for another minor crime and petty theft or something like that. They go back into prison again. And for the police officers, for the police service, better training, obviously, because they are the first port of call when it comes to criminality, to properly recognize those whose main issue is that of a mental illness and try, if possible, to divert those to the treatment settings instead of putting them through the criminal justice systems. And of course, this would need some changes in legislation and in regulations so that the police officers are comfortable when they make such diversions, so that it's written in the laws. It's not just something that somebody does out of pity. So we need legal reforms in terms of the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Act, in terms of the Mental Disorders Act and the Penal Code, to try and facilitate better diversion of those with mental illness from the criminal justice system to the treatment services, while at the same time actually supporting and strengthening those mental health services so that when you do divert these individuals, the services are properly resourced to actually be able to support, to accommodate those individuals. We also need to involve the media and educate people about mental illness to avoid the stigma that people have towards those with mental illness. I'll touch into the matter of suicides because it's very common, a topical, distressing issue in our communities. The common characteristics, I think we hear about it almost every week, that somebody has killed a girlfriend usually, or an ex-girlfriend, and then either they are missing and the police will then mount a manhunt to try and find them, or they've killed themselves. The typical individual who does that is male. The typical victim is an intimate partner or a family member. And the typical reason is that the female partner was trying to leave the relationship, or was threatening to leave the relationship, or had left the relationship. And when you look at studies about this issue, jealousy comes out as one of the most common factors in such relationships, where the relationship was marred by jealousy by the offending partner. There's issues of financial stress, of course, mental illness, desire to save the loved ones from suffering. But those we tend not to see in this country a lot, because where it's the desire to save the loved one from suffering, it's usually mothers with mental illness or mothers with social issues like financial difficulties, and then they commit suicide, and then they decide, Kana me when I'm gone, who's going to look after my children? So let me just kill myself and kill my child as well. So you see this usually in the Western setting. And of course, then in mental illness, sometimes, again, you see it commonly in mothers where someone is so unwell that maybe they believe that something, some harm is going to happen to their children, or maybe the child is a demon or something like that, and then they kill the child and then kill themselves as well. That's very rare in our setting. I want to talk about jealousy. I'm a clinician. I see patients every day. I'm going to be seeing patients from 2 today. And relationships which are marred by jealousy are very risky relationships for the murder of one of the partners. And these are relationships where the partner is very jealous or preoccupied with the notion that the other one is either cheating on them or is interested in others. And these people are frequently making this kind of accusations. They are following their partners around, monitoring the phone, monitoring their movements to kind of confirm their suspicion. And a lot of times they would have even confronted other people to say they're going out with their partners, even where it is really, really false. You'll be surprised the extent to which jealous partners go. Botswana is a relatively small country, so chances are that, most of us would know somebody who works in the police force or is the member of the DIS or works for Masscom. And people will go to the extent of using their contacts at Masscom or in the DIS to track the partner to say, and they would confront you and ka 9 o'clock p.m. yesterday, and you say something and they tell you, no, I tracked your phone and in a super. So that's how far people who are jealous can go to actually, and that's a high risk factor for murder of the partner and murder-suicide. The other risk factors include domestic violence, which you've talked about, partners who are controlling, history of criminality, and when it comes to mental illness, the most common mental illness when it comes to murder-suicides are issues such as depression and narcissistic personality, and also antisocial personality. People who are suicidal or have previously attempted suicides, stressful life events. Substance abuse is a common factor as well in this situation. People who feel disconnected or feel unheard, those who've previously made threats. There's access to dangerous weapons. We've seen in the very past that those from the disciplined forces who've access to guns have been involved in such situations. So access to dangerous weapons such as firearms does increase the risk of murder-suicides. Because when you think about it, if you don't have a gun, it's very unlikely that you can kill 3 people at one go, because when you try and tackle one, the other one is probably going to run away. But if you have an automatic weapon, it's very easy to kill 3 people. So access to weapons is a lot of issue. A lot of times there is either suspicion or actual infidelity in the relationships. And gender roles and gender socialization is changing. So whereas in the past, it was mainly the male partner who would be involved in issues of infidelity. Nowadays, female partners also sometimes want to revenge and say to you, well, he's cheated me, so I might as well cheat. But unfortunately, a lot of men in our society still find it's very shameful, and it comes with a lot of dishonor if the female partner is cheating on them. And they find it very difficult to tolerate that. There's also loss of investment in our society. That's what I want to call it, where people feel like they've invested in the person, and so the person can't just leave them after all the investment that they have put. It's very common in our society. And it's a common theme where somebody can actually get involved because they feel like the person has used their resources and now they want to move on with somebody else. So the warning signs are associated with what I've just been saying, and also are associated with what we know are the warning signs of suicide, which is threats of suicide or homicide. His Excellency this morning mentioned that these are crimes that take place in private settings where we are not able to actually reach. But what's interesting is that when you research shows persistently that people involved in murder of their partners and even in murder suicides, a lot of them would have made threats before. A lot of them would have actually come to in contact with the criminal justice system in terms of acts of abuse or violence having been reported to the police in the past. A lot of them would have written something somewhere in terms of social media or in terms of their status, would have said goodbye or told somebody that, take care of my dog or take care of something. They would have said something which people did not really take seriously or did not really act upon.
Dr. Tula, I do apologize. Kindly consider wrapping up the presentation
Yes.
due to time constraints.
So,
Thank you so much.
I'm just wrapping up. So those are some of the warning signs. And in terms of the prevention, we need to improve the recognition and response to domestic violence. We need to educate young people about abusive behaviors so that they know when they're in abusive relationships. Community awareness is very important. Restriction of access to lethal weapons, mental health services, and support for those who are at risk. And the summary is more or less the same as what we have said. We also need to be willing to engage in uncomfortable discussions and not just prioritize political correctiveness when dealing with these issues, so that for those who feel, for example, that they've lost their investment, or they come in angry saying the person over Jetsimari, are they given a platform and listened to, or they're just dismissed until they commit such acts? So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And like the president said, after talking for 2 days, people need to start doing something. Because if you don't change the way we are doing things, if we don't change our laws, we don't change the way that we are actually intervening when cases of domestic violence come to our force, things will continue the way they are. You'll continue getting the results that you are getting if you don't change the way that you are. And praying is not enough. You've been given power to actually be able to do things and change things. You've been given the authority and the ability to do things and change things in our lives. We can't just pray and say that miracles will happen. Thank you very much. Those are my contacts.
Dr. Tula, thank you so much for that insightful, most informative presentation. Indeed, we extend that appreciation to all of our presenters. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have one more speaker to take us through some interesting aspects of policing strategies, and that is going to be taking us to our lunch break for today. Immediately after lunch break, we will be settling into the panel discussion segment, and we'll introduce you to your moderator in due course. Until then, without further ado, Policing Strategies, a presentation by the Chief of Staff Operations, Commissioner Dr. Bazibi Dube, all the way from the Republic of Zimbabwe. Let's receive him.
A very good afternoon, all protocol observed, Madam. Thank you. I've been given a very short period of time to discuss on the perspective, the Zimbabwean perspective, and the best practices on community policing to combat crime. So you will allow me, I'm going to summarize a lot of the issues that I'd prepared for you. Those are the objectives. I think I will not waste a lot of time on them, but they are going to guide our discussion this afternoon. Right, maybe as an introduction, the ZRP, standing for the Zimbabwe Republic Police, perspective on policing strategies and the best practices in community policing hinges mainly on the following aspects. Yeah, sure. Okay. It's actually, right? We look at the intelligence-led policing. I think you'll agree with me that intelligence is very key in the management of crime. We also look at the strategic planning, which is planning in a long-term perspective. That is use of certain blueprints that we have. These are relevant to the Zimbabwean perspective, may not be that much important, but it is important to take note that we actually plan in a long term. You are aware that crime does not stop. We know that even in the next 5-10 years, we will still be facing certain aspects of crime. We use contemporary policing strategies and actively engaging the public to combat crime. I think we are going to discuss this afternoon a lot about the involvement of the public in the fight against crime. We look at stakeholder participation. This includes, I think you heard from His Excellency this morning, directing the involvement of everyone in the fight against crime. Right, like we agreed on our objectives, intelligence-led policing. How is it important that as police we gather sufficient intelligence to speak to us as to where possibly crime is happening, where it is likely to happen, who may be involved and how. We have a criminal investigation unit. I think you also have the same here. That mainly primarily works on foretelling where crime may occur and how it may occur, who should be involved. Then we come to the strategic planning. Like I said, we have to throw our focus into the future and understand what is going to be happening, kind of like predict using some of the concepts that we heard from the experts today, where we can then analyze. This helps us then to plan and be able to put strategies well in advance to be able to combat crime. But primarily this afternoon, my main focus is going to be on community policing, especially looking at the Zimbabwean perspective. Community policing recognizes that the community and its leaders are equal partners in the prevention and reduction of crime. And if you heard the statements from this morning, even up to the head of state, the issue was everyone is a partner. Everyone is an equal partner. Everyone has a role to play in the fight against crime. It can never be left to the police alone. So crime prevention by key stakeholders such as members of the Business Against Crime Forum, the Neighborhood Watch Committee in Zimbabwe, play an integral role in organizing business, community, or the village to cooperate with the police in the fight against crime. We have a number of concepts that are at play in Zimbabwe, and we are going to discuss just a couple of them in our discussion this afternoon. The ZRP recognizes community policing strategy as a strategy that involves the citizens in designing, implementation, and evaluation of law enforcement programs. It means the community is not only involved in the actual activities to fight crime, but is also involved even at the planning stages. And I'm happy with this platform in its noble sense that you need to also sit in planning as to how crime can be curtailed in our society. Community policing is among a host of local responses to security matters and concerns to enhance crime management and reduce the fear of crime in communities. You are aware that people must not be afraid when they go to bed that they are likely to be mugged, their houses are likely to be broken into, or all other ills related to crime. So the ZRP, the Zimbabwe Republic Police, emphasizes that central to its crime awareness and prevention strategies is community policing. We adopted community policing in 1985, coming from 1980 when we gained our independence. Unfortunately, before independence, it was more of a concept of us and them, that is the police and the rest of the public. And I will not go into why things were like that. I think we all appreciate we had not gained independence. So there was quite some work to be done to now break that barrier, break that jinx where you look at the police and the public, but you should look at the concept as one sharing the same objectives and same vision. Right, so those are some of the community policing strategies that we have in Zimbabwe that we use in the fight against crime, in actually analyzing and understanding crime and coming up with strategies to fight crime. We have the Neighborhood Watch Committees, and during the discussions that I saw from morning, I saw that most of these things are very common with what you are doing here and your approaches here in Botswana. You have the crime liaison committees, the home officers scheme. All these are in application. The junior call, which has actually been very key in catching them young, because like you heard from the experts who were explaining here, at times we need to reduce the risk of and the possibility of one falling into crime. So if we catch them young, make them proper citizens, make them understand why at times rules apply, why it is important to comply with the rules, then you are less likely to have that child falling into crime. We also have the bases, posts, and so forth. You understand that during the colonial era in my country, it was quite taboo to see somebody at a police station, even maybe to interact with the police. So you will find that the police were quite a distance away, were members of the public, even if they have crimes or some other problems with crime to report. Some of them would even hesitate to approach police establishment, not because they don't have a problem, not because they are not offended, but because they consider the distances involved to go and report their cases. So they tend to resolve issues within their locality, and sometimes they boggle things inside. Like you heard from the experts, that at the end of the day may lead to other ills such as suicide and many other issues. We have the suggestion boxes and hotlines. These days you have the social media, which is very key in quick movement of information to reach to people. You have the use of the informer network. All these are concepts that are widely used in Zimbabwe in the fight against crime, in bringing the communities to unite in the fight against crime. And then you have the strategic deployments. Yes, you may sit and plan against crime, you may sit, you may inculcate the community in the fight against crime, but at the end of the day, as police were obliged to actually make strategic deployments, not only to arrest offenders, but to prevent the occurrence of crime. Because like they always say, prevention is better than cure. As police, our endeavor is to prevent the occurrence of crime before we can talk of actually investigating, detecting, and arresting offenders. That's an overview on our community policing. Like I said, from the time of inception in 1985, then coming to 1995 when we introduced the change program in the Zimbabwe Republic Police. Central to that change program was always the involvement of the community in crime issues. Let me not say only fight, but in crime issues in their totality. Right, those were pronouncements that were made by our then Prime Minister, President R.J. Mugabe, when he actually realized that there was a need to shift from the dispensation that was there before 1980, before we gained independence, to actually move into a collective approach where the community becomes not only a partner, but an equal partner in dealing with the crime issues. You'll bear with me, I'm trying to construct everything within the allocated time. Right. So, like I said, those are the crime, the community policing strategies that we have. I had already discussed on them, the station community relations liaison officers. And I'm happy today, I'm accompanied by the Deputy Press and Public Relations Officer for the Zimbabwe Republic Police, who is going to be key in our plenary when we discuss these issues. They had this, and every station and the base throughout the country has an officer responsible for the station community relations and the liaison officer. And it has been proved that they are becoming or have become a bridge between the police and the community, and they always explain all concepts, all actions that are being done by the police to members of the public, so that they become equal partners, they contribute both in terms of ideas, strategies, and everything that needs to be done towards crime. The neighborhood watch committees, we saw that if members of the public become equal partners, they contribute even their own to fight crime. That becomes the sense of ownership is actually achieved. You don't have, it's for the police, but this is ours. They police their locality. They are able even to come up with the strategies with the guidance of the police that are tailor-made and unique to their own sphere and the locality. 5, okay. Then the crime liaison committees, they've been very important. The home officer scheme, this has helped us to make sure that a police officer gets to know his community. He deploys or is based in that particular locality and is aware of the problems that are actually happening in that community. The junior call I've already mentioned, catch them young, and they are less likely to be involved in crime. So this has actually been very, very productive in our country. The construction of bases to reduce the distance between the police and the public. The police special constabulary scheme, where because we are aware that as police, the government cannot sustain a very big bloated police force. So if you then have the police constabulary, these are the people who are recruited within the locality. They contribute their valuable time in doing police work, in actually patrolling our streets and the neighborhood. This has actually helped to a large extent. Then the interagency approach, I had already spoken about that. Briefly, these are the benefits, as you can see, the benefits that accrue from involving the community. The biggest benefit is that there is ownership. Everyone understands that, yes, we have an obligation to ensure that our societies, our community, our streets, and the neighborhood is free from crime. But of course, everything that is positives always has its own negatives. I have also highlighted in my presentation, which I'll give to Ma'am, the problems of community policing. Yes, these arise and they are endemic to the implementation of this program, but they can be managed and they have to be minimized so that we enjoy the benefits of community policing. In conclusion, I know it was a marathon, but community policing cannot be taken as an option. It is actually the in thing to do. The police cannot police a nation alone. They must involve the whole community, from the planning stages to the implementation and evaluation, as we are doing today, to see where we are going and re-strategize. And the cycle goes on and on. I hope I have not ranted without meaning for any longer than is necessary. May you allow me to rest my case at this stage. I thank you.
You managed the time very excellently. Thank you very much, Dr. Dube from ZRP, for that insightful Zimbabwean perspective. We wish we had more time. We realized that you had so much to share with us. Time has always been this great, great enemy. May we give the doctor a round of applause, please? Thank you very much. We are getting close to the end of the morning session. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to need your cooperation that we be able to wrap up in the next 20 minutes and break for lunch at 13:20 hours. That is, if we agree that we are going to get one comment from this side, one comment here, and then we break for lunch. But before I invite the questions and comments, let me humbly remind the panelists of the afternoon session that they are requested to hurry their lunch, if I'm allowed to say that, and come back earlier go ta go baakanyetsa go tsena mo sessioneng e latelang e bata mo bantse ha ba re thatella ka tsela e ntseng jalo. Beng ba mi ke nako ya dipotso le dikakgelo ka boripana ba re na ke la tsholetsa lo ke to go supa mambe ke togela ma. Hey, ke vela la ine bata ke kupile morena mi ramantse go pata ka go. I'll start. Thank you for dropping the hands. Ke ta tsa lona mongami, the gentleman in the white shirt. Le nne mokutshwane se ka boikokobetso le ntebelela ha ke re ana lebele le khat. Thank you, sir.
Ke a leboga te ke tsena ko e go go leboga madam ke be ke leboge motsadi wa rona commissioner Marata ke tsena ko e go leboga batsadi ke bidiwa gote Lesedi Dexter ke tswa mo stationeng sa ga Rekwarare ko Thamaga ke le modulasetilo wa station ke le loko la committee ya district number 11 le loko la committee kgolo ya division ko Lobatse mme ke utlwile dintlha tsotlhe tse botsadi bontseng bo supa ka matshwenyego mabapi le borukutli mme ke sala ke kgonosela thata batsadi mo reporteng ya ga motlotlegi wa rona wa ntlha o nneng a re fa pego ya dipalopalo tsa borukutli deputy commissioner wa amile dintlha dingwe kgotsa setlhogo sa dintlha tse dintsinyana tse di tsisang pitlagano e tona thata mo lefatsheng le la Botswana mabapi le dipolao tsa batho tse di bonang e le tsone di tshotseng taolo mo lefatsheng le la Botswana mabapi le ditagi tseo ka gone di bonalang e le tsone di tshotseng taolo mo lefatsheng le la Botswana mme kana kgang e ne le gore seemo ga sentse jana ga re tsenya ditlhogo se ka tweng seemo se kana go ra gore diemo tse go buiwang ka tsone ke tsone jaanong tse di busang mo lefatsheng molao ga o tlhole o tshotse taolo ke a itse botsadi
Ke kopa o rape up mongame ke
Okay.
kopa o etswale mongame o
Ke a leboga mme.
o suggest gore wa kanya gore go tweng ka boripananyana
ke a leboga
Ke a leboga.
nte ke re go botlhokwa thata gore molao o eme ka dinao a molao o eme ka dinao o gagamale because la ha ile mo lapeng go na le lehoko le le reng ga go sena molao lehoko la re ya beile kwa ga mapereko mme jalo a molao o gagamale dilo tse di tseelwe taolo di tle di ye ko tlase le dula le botshelo jo bontle jwa lehatshe le e tle nne bone bo phatsima jaaka na le diamoso ke a leboga
ke a leboga mongame a re mo opeleng matsogo ka boripana re be re tsaya wa bobedi re be re tsaya wa boraro re be re ka ya ko dijong tsa motshegare ke kopa gore re tseng yana batsadi ba me let us try to be brief and probably come up with a suggestion nna ke akanya gore mo go ya missing persons ya ka mothusa mamapodisi a na e bua ke akanya gore go ka tuana re se ka ra repeata se nne di-presentera di se bua ga ke ikokobeditse beng ba mme ka tsela e ntseng jalo morena le kile la bua Bomme re kae? Madam o eme ka dinao ha hetsa se ha le hetsa go ta bua mme. Ka boripana mongae.
Ka boripana. I'll touch more issue in the review of our legal system, especially Dr. Tula Nabuaga issue long gore batho ba long gore ba na le bogole ba gatelelwa ke go botlhokwa gore ga ile ba tshwantse gore ba ye go dipateleng go ile gore ba ka go a go ateng a re direng jalo justice system ile be le go mo ka nni. The one thing say long gore gape get me worried ke di incidents tse le gore re bua ka tsone serious crimes. Ha re bua ka go utswa ga batho go tsena ga ditage goreng. One then says obviously we're not level DIS, but here we are not doing more DIS. I'm sure we are talking policing. And policing then need to have its own way in which they can collect the intelligence or within our police system. Yeah, intelligence collection, analysis, and so forth. It then deals with these serious crimes because these serious crimes cannot just be let to happen. So it's about missing persons, drugs, everything that need to be entrenched within the police. Thank you very much. What the guy Polela? Kibidwa Tawana, Timen Chilume. Gileganale Police 2003 as a superintendent. I joined the Botswana. Just retired as a security executive from there. Thank you very much.
Mothers, over to you. Le riana ka boripana motsadi wa. Le ska la igolola. Le simolla ka go ipolela gore ke lona ma.
Ke bidwa Loratan Tau ke tswa kgaolo ya number 7 mme ke tswa motsane wa Patamateng. Tota nna ke lebaganye le burukuthi but ele ka kgelo ya gore ba gaetso a re togele bo ga dinkane ba kaulengwe ba bante matwantsho burukuthi ba bante a re togele ga dinkane re se ka ra tshwana le motho mongwe yo kile a re a bona ngwana ga go a bolawa a ba ka gore wa gagwe ene ga ka ke a bolawa ka lebaka la gore ene o tsama ka dithako tse di la di bona tse di ha tse di telle ba gaetso a ka gore ngwana o tshwantse bele wa ga Matau a ra nna mme ngwana o bolawayo e le wa gagwe jaanong ga dinkame a re tswe mo go ena a re thusane ke se ka re ga ke tsena mo go wena ke go repotela selo wena ga o tswa go yana o se bua ka go sele ba gaetso a re cancele ga dinkame re kgone go lwantsha borukuti ka go tshwanetse mo go se sengwe nna ne ke kopa re thupa a go thupa e boele dio tse dingwe di ka siama ka gore ha motho a biditswe gompieno a ba bo a betswa ka moso ga ka ke atala boraro amen
Amen, amen, Marona. Kitoko tsa motsadi, how we have 5 more minutes. Kitoko tsa motsadi ha elo wena wa bohelo ke go nela exactly 3 minutes or onto gelle 2 minutes go bua gore ra go jajang ke a leboga mongame le reta.
A re dumele mo leina la Kgosi Jesu. Ke Kgosi go tswa kwa mo Lepolole ke le modula stilo wa station. Wa rano re itebaganya hala le gore tharabollo ke nna ke bona gore le tshwere go ntse le alotse bana ba simanyana ba satlhanyana ba goga ditagi le ba lola le ba katela ka ditronko le tlogela go modi yaanong kgang ke gore a re lwantsha borukutlhiana a re tshware mogogi wa ditagi le morekisi e ba re isa ko ba tsang teng re bone hela batho ba malapa hela mangwe le mangwe la rileng ba le ko makgotla a tshekelong ba sekela go neela bana ditagi gone mo hela mongwe ke gone re ka go kgona ma otlho ra lotse ba sesanyane bo re nya re tla be ra lotse mo ga tla le silo ba tla ka ditronko mme gone go sena tharabololo khantile ngwe kileng ya mega ke mogolo hale ha bana re bona motho a tshwere dirwe tsa motho a isa ko ngakeng a ngaka le yone tle go seka ko re ko midi re se ka ra o kola hela go godimo yana re hela ko midi ka gore bana le mo aga ke le mokgotleng gona le gore bana ba tla ba tenne tlhaloganyo mosadi ene ka ha wa neighbor a re ngwana yo nkgakgaletsong puisitse mahoko a sa siamang mo kgwathise kgosi ha ke mo tsaya ke neelanga doctora gore a mo ntšhekele gore a o itekanetse ngaka doctora o tla mpolelela gore ga itekanela mo ke a mo treata ka gore o thenne tlhaloganyo lebaka e le ditagi o bona gore re na le le balwala tlhaloganyo ba bakiwang ke ditagi tse e leng gore re tshwara ba sele ko dikgetsi di leng teng ba sa seke a ba simololle go seka ke a leboga
ra leboga ke lemoga gore ba dula stilo ba di-clustera tsa rona ba e tshwere ka bokgabane mma ba innile nako batsadi ba me modimo wa ruta re thusa next time re nna le more time gore le kgone go akgela ka dikgang ke a bona gore le di tshotse mme mo nakong e re ta ko motsubong wa tirelo ya moso ya go tlhaloganya selebego sa borukhuti understanding the criminal landscape re reditse dibui tsa rona ka go harologana mothusa mmamapodisi re lesola ngaka Malila ngaka Thula Commissioner Dr. Dube from Zimbabwe ka Zimbabwe Police ka tsele ntseng yalo ke dumela gore re ithutile go le gontsi mo go bone mme ibile gongwe re ta ha re bone motsotso outside this hall re ta bo re ntse re ka bua le bone ra sela sengwe gape mo nakong ye we're going to take our lunch break barena our protocol officers are all over here ba to gore guide gore ba he ba ya go kae ja ka re dirile ka nako ya tea break ke tabo ki kokobeditse ki kupile gore gongwe re eme ka dino be re nta bagolwane ba rona ba tswa ka tselentseng before re ema ba rena sorry our lunch break is exactly 1 hour right now is 1:15 my instructions were that we break at 13:20 and we come back at 14:20 so we have an extra 5 minutes are mo di resensente e re ka exactly 14:20 re be re ntse hatse re letetse gore session ya afternoon e simologa thank you so much for your cooperation modimo a ntse go a letse lona ke a lebogare ka emara ntaba golo ba tswa
Ladies and gentlemen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we prepare to depart for lunch, you are advised that there is a little bit of protocol that we will be observing with regards to our dining options and dining locations. We do have ACP Khetse, who will assist ACP office in guiding our VIP or top table to their dining facility. And all of us are invited delegates to enjoy lunch at the White Marquee that I believe most of us here are very aware of. We'll meet for lunch at the White Marquee, and our VIPs will be enjoying lunch at the dining facility. Thank you so much for your understanding. Otherwise, though, a kind reminder, as SACP has said, please be reminded if you are on.
And of course, that is how the program unfolded with various panel discussions and of course a lot of conversations around what this is looking like in terms of the understanding the criminal landscape of the country in light of what the country wants to move in, the direction in which it aspires to move in. So we are looking at a packed program. Of course, from morning, if you have been watching, there was a lot of conversation from the official opening of the president to opening speeches by the commissioner of police, as well as various stakeholders who took to the platform a lot of issues around crime. Very interesting conversations coming in. We did have reflections. We did have possible solutions even coming in from various community members across the board, across all sectors of development. We had statistics also coming in to talking about the criminal landscape of the country. There were a lot of criminal offenses that were mentioned by different stakeholders, the likes of drug trafficking as one of the major issues that are of concern at community level, at domestic level, at national level, and of course the possible solutions therein. There were issues around trafficking in Botswana, and I do remember there were statistics around from 2020 to 2024. There are almost 16 reported cases of trafficking in Botswana, which of course is worrisome and an issue that calls for urgent attention on the part of law enforcement and of course all critical stakeholders. And of course, a lot was said about the target group there is mainly women and young girls who often fall victim to trafficking. And there was issues around cyber fraud, as well as harassment, and of course policy framework, and also issues around what can be done in terms of attending to issues around cyber fraud, and obviously the issue of caution on the part of the public to ensure that obviously they guard against their financial security, to ensure that they do not fall victim to issues of cyber fraud. There were also cases of livestock theft that were mentioned. Issues of food security also come into play. Obviously when you talk about issues of livestock, that's the livelihoods of some communities and farmers at a domestic level. And of course, it really does now tie into taking away the bread and butter of an ordinary citizen who obviously lives off their livestock at a subsistence level. So the issues around the repercussions of crime and how they affect an ordinary citizen were also mentioned. We also heard issues of defilement, which are also worrying cases coming in as well. Different stakeholders spoke to how defilement also is very worrying. Statistics on defilement also reported on a daily basis across the country as well. We also did hear of another criminal offense of having missing persons, and of course different stakeholders took to the platform. Different issues around the elderly are mostly susceptible, and the very young are mostly susceptible to falling becoming known as missing persons. And there are those who are retrieved or are finally found at some point, but there were staggering and very worrying statistics of those who remain unfound to this day. And obviously there were statistics around from 2020 to this date, both male and female, who obviously even remain missing even to this point. Issues of suicide as well were also very worrisome, staggering statistics there, alarming and very disturbing cases of suicide, and of course the possible causes therein. The police officer who actually took to the podium issues around suicide talked about the fact that you have the youngest population committing suicide and the oldest population committing suicide. He mentioned having a 7-year-old, reports of a 7-year-old having committed suicide, and having somebody who is 75 years old. The disparities there are also very worrisome. And obviously, when you look into investigating just what could have caused or could have led to those said individuals committing suicide, young people are mostly susceptible. Issues around some have faced fear of rejection. Some, obviously did that because intimate relationships didn't work out the way that they intended. Stress-related issues, depression, mental illness, and so forth. There's so many issues that obviously came out from that. And then there's so many in terms of now what the solution-based approaches are. There were issues around establishing partnerships or effective prevention partnerships that could help in ensuring crime prevention. There were issues around combined efforts that they are critical to establishing sustainable means of, fighting crime. Issues around murder as well and missing persons, one of the few that I mentioned as very concerning. But at the core of it, stakeholders really did speak to the need for collaborative efforts on the part of all stakeholders and combined efforts, not only locally, but also regionally. You do have international organizations, regional organizations that work together with Botswana and the rest of the world, the likes of Interpol, to ensure that in terms of handling issues around criminal activity or understanding the criminal landscape, a lot is done not only on the domestic front, but regionally, as well as internationally. And at the core of it also, just looking at how this program is packed, we understand that this is a 2-day event. Tomorrow there is an expectation of a lot of conversations also around what could happen or what will happen. But maybe just a reminder, if at all you weren't with us this morning and when the program kick-started, at the core of it, we're looking at Botswana Police as a critical partner in handling issues of law enforcement. And of course, it does not work in isolation. Botswana Police has, or continues rather, to partner with different organs, different institutions that ensure that we fight crime at all levels possible, not just locally, not just regionally, but also, individuals also taking on that responsibility and different communities across all sectors of development taking on that responsibility to ensure that fighting crime not in isolation but as a collective. And of course, maybe just in wrapping up our conversation, we did speak to Senior Superintendent Selina Umpila earlier, but I just hope that we will just get her insights into, in terms of moving forward with today's program as well as tomorrow's program. What are the major takeaways? Mayor Umpila, thank you so much for joining us once again. It's been a very eventful day, from morning right up until this moment. What can be said now? What are the major takeaways for Botswana Police, and can we say today has been very successful in terms of having those honest conversations that the president asked for?
Yes, I would say it's very, very successful because we are getting where we intentionally wanted to get to. The conversations that we have already had, where we are, rutuleng ka mental health and crime. A bua ka dikgang tse e leng gore di kgona go dira gore motho a heletse a dira molato, mme e le gore ke dikgang tsa mental issues. Re setse re hutule best practices maka ba Zimbabwe. Some lessons that we have picked from that for crime prevention, to ensure that individuals participate in crime prevention. So say program, for instance, programs they are targeting kids and young people. Junior police corps or something of that sort. These are things going forward. We are learning. And then crime basically in a community. These are lessons, these are issues that we really needed to hear and know. Thank you, ma'am.
Talking about the things that we really needed to learn and to know, like you said, there were so many criminal activities, the likes of, livestock theft, issues around suicide, drug trafficking, and trafficking in BW, in general. What have you established as the Botswana Police? ha kae sente and maybe the possible solutions there. Yeah, trafficking of people. Mme segolobogolo e leng gore e tshabela bomme le bana ba basetsana.
Hey, tota ke tareng, probably because of gore bomme ha kere ba traffickiwa like in issues of bomarato, for instance, where somebody falls for somebody on Facebook, the conversation starts, crowd basically, I think I would say culturally, they are dependent, you know, more to provide. So in those instances, they fall for people by Facebook. I think I would, you know, just say it in a nutshell, to say, a lot of times.
Gongwe ha re connectela conversation re beletse gore kana le motsatsing la ka moso tota ebile this afternoon ta bo go ntse go tswelela ka dipuisano jalo le motsatsing la ka moso gape go ntse mo ileng gore re go solohetse re ka reng re ditsholetswe keng mo di conversations tse leng gore di tsantse di tanna teng mabapi le dikgang tsa the criminal landscape ya mo Botswana.
Hello, I see a lot of excitement from participants, from attendants. Everybody wants to talk. But we can take forward to solve issues of crime. This is the collaboration and partnership because I want to solution. So I would say we are looking forward to a beautiful afternoon because there's a similar panel discussion and I still people are ignited. But the panel discussion is and then we're also looking towards tomorrow. It's gonna end up beautifully. So at the end of the day, the resolutions they will be relevant and applicable to communities. For instance, I get a certain community in so this is basically what we're trying to do. Relevant solutions or strategies that will apply to that particular community.
Gongwe re sa preempte me Omphile gongwe re ka solohela gore diphuthego tsa go nnana di ka nna is it on a yearly basis, on a quarterly basis? How efficiently can we have these conversations?
Ghana conversations depend on a lot of things. I get the financial implications. Say almost quarterly. Secondly, amid conversations, what happens to the resolutions? Are they implemented? Because implement and see where it takes us, and then that is going to inform probably our next conference. It happens or the next conference.
Dumela jalo gone gore tare following le mo lezila ka moso re ta bo re ntse re ta ruta gone gore di resolution e keng hela jalo e be re nna re le that accountability re tana re ntse re le setse morago le ba Botswana police re ruta gone gore go hela kae re lebogile thata me Omphile.
Mma go lebogile rona, thank you so much.
Thank you. And of course, that was Mayor Selina Omphile. Tota atsa gone go Botswana Police Service a re konetela pisona tsatsi la gompeno. Me e se gore tsatsi la gompeno le wela jalo e le gore thulaganyo ka kwano ke rena ba ile gore gongwe re ta bo re ntse re wetsa me thulaganyo tsa kwano ta bo dintse di tswela hela jalo jaaka re itse gone gore tsatsi la gompeno go ta bo gona le session e leng gore ta be tswela ta bo ntse tswela le mo tsatsing la kamoso me re itse gone gore hela ka today gona le the session ya understanding the criminal landscape e tswela jalo more this afternoon go nna le yone panel discussion e le gore tabo e buisa yalo community-based approaches to crime prevention. Establishing strategic partnerships at a community level, from all walks of life coming in in challenges, gaps, in terms of establishing solution-based approaches. Different organs within the police service. Best practices, challenges, and collaborative solutions for crime prevention. Like Meon Pile has already said also, the exciting part beyond this platform, these resolutions, how they will be implemented going forward towards establishing Botswana as a safe and secure nation by the year 2036, and of course beyond that as well. Botswana Television, the programming me